Alrighty. The one who encourages you to audit down. Testing audio. Testing. Testing the audio. Testing. Testing the audio. Testing audio. Testing. Yep, we're on. Testing the audio. Testing. Audio. Testing. Alrighty, we are on like Timothy Thomas.
Alrighty.
Hey, beard photographer, how's it going? Palestine Hurra. Alrighty, here we're doing a reading here of the Illinois Compiled Statute 50 ILCS 45-1. And let me zoom in here. We just finished reviewing the Steve Emerson taxes. Now we're looking into something from that element. Alrighty. '50 ILCS Illinois Compiled Statutes 45-5 Legislative Declaration. This one is heavy duty. Legislative Declaration. It is the intent of the General Assembly that the legislation grant various rights and protections to taxpayers and tax collectors with respect to the administration and enforcement of local government tax laws. The provisions of this act are designed to reduce the burden on both the taxpayer and tax collectors by specifically providing that fair and consistent tax processes and procedures be adopted and disseminated to taxpayers at local level, while at the same time preserving local government's full authority to collect taxes lawfully due under their taxing ordinances. The legislation also provides that taxpayers a minimum level. The legislation also provides that taxpayers a minimum level of consistency with regard to the assessment and collection of local taxes as they do business in multiple locations within the state. Here's the cute part right here. Hey, Bill T. The General Assembly further finds that the tax systems are largely based on voluntary compliance and self-assessment. Huh. Alrighty, this further says, and the development of understandable tax laws, providing clear tax laws at the local level and providing all necessary due process rights in the collection and enforcement of local tax laws will only serve to improve voluntary compliance and self-assessment of local government taxes. Self-assessment. Yeah. 4510. Application and Home Rule preemption. The limitation provided by this act shall take precedence over any provision of any tax ordinance imposed by a unit of local government, as defined in this act in Illinois, including, without limitation, any tax authorized under Section 811 of the Illinois Municipal Code, 811-2 of the Illinois Municipal Code. Consistent with the limitations provided by this act, a municipality other than a municipality having a population greater than 1 million may not impose any penalty with respect to tax authorized by Section 811-2 of the Illinois Municipal Code with respect to an audit authorized by Section 811-2.5 of the Illinois Municipal Code, except as specified in Section 50-55 and 60 of this act. So this is telling us voluntary compliance, meaning it's your responsibility to comply. Don't get it twisted. Well, if you read what's here on the screen, it's saying that, that there is self-assessment. Self-assessment. Alrighty. The act is a denial and limitations and home rule powers, yada yada. Alrighty. Section 15. 4515. Definitions in this act. Definitions in this act. Locally imposed and administered tax, which is the LIAT, means a tax imposed by a unit of local government that is collected or administered by a unit of local government and not an agency or department of the state. A locally imposed and administered tax does not include a tax imposed upon real property under the property tax code, or fees. We got to read that over. Or fees collected by a unit of local government other than infrastructure maintenance fees. So this is telling us again, it's saying locally imposed and administered tax means a tax imposed by a local government. Yep, they're talking county, not statewide. Or they're talking county, not state. By a local government, yada yada, department of the state. A locally imposed and administered tax does not include a tax imposed upon real property under the property tax code. If it doesn't impose real property, then how is it a unit of local government, which is a county? Well, let's go ahead and carry on here. This is not legal advice. Do more reading at home. Disclaimer, this is not legal advice. Alrighty, local tax administrator. Local tax administrator includes directors of local government departments of revenue or taxation, or other local government officers charged with the administration or collection of a locally imposed and administered tax, including their staff, employees, or agents to the extent they are authorized by local tax administrator to act in the local tax administrator's stead. Oh, that's cute. Local tax administrator includes directors, yada yada, or agents to the extent that they are authorized by local tax administrator administrator to act in the local tax administrator's stead. Yes, hey, how may I help you? Welcome to the county treasurer's office. How may I help you here? Well, the treasurer's not available to speak with as of right now. We do have representatives here that would be more than happy to answer any one of your questions. They're taking the administrator's seat. Well, let me define it. Stead.
Here's the definition of stead: the place or role that someone or something should have or fill, used in referring to a substitute.
Right. Substitute, yeah. Yeah, we have employees here that have all the answers to any of your questions. Hey, PR, what I'm up though? You're wrong, that's not all. You're wrong, that's all, not arguing. Hey, Dub, I'm not sure what you're referring to. So let's go ahead and carry on here. Unit of local government includes a municipality, a county, or home rule unit of the state, but does not include 1. Home rule municipalities with a population greater than 1 million, or 2. Home rule counties with a population greater than 3 million that have locally administered departments or bureaus of revenue. Yeah, we might have to read this stuff over, but let's keep going here. Responsibilities of units of local government. Each unit of local government shall have the powers and obligations enumerated in the following sections to protect the rights of the taxpayers. And this is at section 50 ILCS 4520. (4525) Application of payments. Taxpayers have the right to know how tax payments and remittance covered. Let's define that one. Remittances. Nah, this one, well, REMITTANCES. Remittance is a broad term that could refer to a number of types of payments. Payment, right. Oh, you got the Black's Law with you, Bill T? Or the Boviers? Or you got it memorized already? So, okay, payments and remittances covered by this act. Well, that's probably what they used to refer to, like in the, before the internet and stuff like that, probably about the 70s and stuff, 80s. Covered by this act will be applied to the tax liability owed to the units of local government. Each unit of local government must provide by ordinance for the order of application of tax payments to the tax liability, for the other order of application or tax payments to the tax liability, penalty and interest, provided that in no case may a payment be applied to penalties due before it is applied to tax or interest. In the event that a unit of local government does not provide for application of payments, any payment or remittance received for a tax period will be applied first to the tax for the first period, then to interest due for the period, and then penalties due for the period. Alrighty. Hey PC, hello there. Section 4530, Statutes of Limitations. Units of local government have an obligation to review tax returns. Oh shit. Have to review tax returns in a timely manner and issue any determination of tax due as promptly as possible, so that taxpayers may have timely corrections of future returns and minimize any interest charges applied to the tax underpayments. Each unit of local government must provide appropriate statutes or limitations for the determination and assessment of taxes covered by this act, provided, however, that a statute of limitations may not exceed the following. Number 1, notice of determination of tax due or assessment may be issued more than 5 years. After the end of the calendar year for which the return period was filed and the end of the calendar year in which the return for the period was due, whichever occurrence later, and audit or review that is timely performed under Section 35 of this Act or Section 8511(2.5) of the Illinois Municipal Code. Alrighty. If any tax return was not filed, or if during any 4-year period for which a notice of tax determination or assessment may be issued by the unit of local government, the tax period or remitted was less than 75% of the tax due for that period. So here's what I'm looking at, that it says tax return filed. If the tax return was not filed, statutes of limitation shall not be no more than 6 years after the end of the calendar year in which the return for the period was due, or that the end of the calendar year in which the return for the period was filed, whichever occurs later. In the event that a unit of local government fails to provide a statute of limitation, the maximum statutory period provided in this section applies. The chances to this section made by Public Act 102-1144 do not revive any determination and assessment of tax due where the statute of limitation has expired as of March 17, 2023. The effective date of the Public Act of 102-1144, but the changes do not extend the statute of limitations for the determinations and assessment of taxes where the statute of limitations has not expired as of March 17, 2023. The effective date of the prohibited act, yada yada. Alrighty, this section does not place any limitation on a unit of local government if a fraudulent tax return is filed. Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. If a fraudulent tax return is filed. Let me go ahead and take a picture. Hey Jack, how's it going? Your comment got withheld there. Alrighty. Audit procedures. Taxpayers have the right to be treated by officers, employees, and agents of local tax administrator with courteous fairness. Oh, here's the cute part. Here's the cute part. Here is the cute part right here. You guys remember when we went to the tax assessor's office in Cook County? Look what it's telling us from different statutes here and there. 13 different statutes. Audit procedures. Taxpayers have the right to be treated by officers, employees, and agents of local tax administrator with courteous fairness, uniformity, and consistency, and common sense. Oh shit, this is a big statute here, man. This is something we've been waiting on. Now let's keep on going. This section applies to any audit of tax imposed by a unit of local government other than a municipality having a population greater than 1 mil. Other than. Okay, so here they're talking about little towns. Except to the extent otherwise provided in Section 811 2.5 of the Illinois Municipal Code, taxpayers must be notified in writing by the local jurisdiction of a proposed audit of the taxpayer books and records clearly identifying who will be conducting the audit. Yeah, we got to give you a record deal, Jack. For audits being conducted by third-party providers, the local jurisdiction must provide written authorization for the third-party provider to review the books and records of the taxpayer. No contact may be made by the third-party provider until the local jurisdiction authorization is received by the taxpayer. Let's read that one more time. The local jurisdiction must provide written authorization for the third-party provider to review the books and records of the taxpayer. No contact may be made by the third-party provider until the local jurisdiction authorization is received by the taxpayer. Man, this is something that we have to, inquire about. Shit. The notice of an audit must specify the tax and the time period to be audited, and must detail the minimum documentation or books and records to be made available to the auditor. Audits must be held only during reasonable times of the day and, unless impractical, at the times agreed to be by the taxpayer. At the times agreed to be by the taxpayer. That's a good one. The auditor must sign a confidentiality agreement upon request by the taxpayer. Man, this is some shit you guys have to read over a few times. Upon the completion of the audit, you have to brush your teeth with strawberries while reading this stuff. Or listening to it. The local jurisdiction must issue an audit closure report to the taxpayer with the results of the audit. Yeah, here's our bicentennial audit report. We have it online. Yeah, it's got 679 pages. It's a extensive commingle with the CAFR, Comprehensive Annual Fiscal Report, Financial Report. So an auditor who determines that there has been an overpayment of tax during the course of the audit is obligated to identify the overpayment to the taxpayer so that the taxpayer can take the necessary steps to recover the overpayment. If the overpayment is the result of an application of some or all of the taxpayer's payment to the incorrect local government entity, then upon request by a unit of local government, the audit information must be given so that the government may be affected by the overpayment. Unit government. Alrighty. If it's neither here, it's neither there. Appeal process. Appeal process. Units of local government have an obligation to provide by ordinance a procedure for appealing a determination of tax due or assessment. Local governments must provide to the taxpayer a written statement of rights, whether the local government issues a protestable notice of tax due, a bill, a claim, a denial, or a notice of claim reduction regarding any tax. The statement must explain the reason for the assessment. The statement must explain. Man, I'm telling you, this stuff has to be read over a few times. The statement must explain the reason for the assessment, the amount of the tax liability proposed. Oh, that's cute. The amount of the tax liability. Oh, well, this is in the subdivision of the northeastern jurisdiction. Therefore, the legal description identifies a tax liability, quite frankly, in this parcel, if you will. The amount of the tax liability proposed, the procedure for appealing the assessment, and the obligations of the unit of local government during the audit, appeal, refund, and collection process. In no event may a taxpayer be provided a time period less than 45 days after the date the notice was served in which to protest a notice of tax determination or notice of tax liability. Hey, PC, take it easy. Any notice of tax assessment due must be sent by United States registered or certified mail. Any notice of tax assessment due. That's a fucking good one. That's a good one. Failure of due process. Alrighty. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, Jack, you need a record deal there. We gotta get you on the late night radio. Okay, any notice of tax assessment due must be sent via USPS mail or certified mail. The unit of local government must also adopt procedure for opening up any closed protest period or extending the protest period upon the showing of reasonable cause by taxpayer and full payment of the contested tax liability, along with the interest accrued as of the due date of the tax. Alrighty. Interest. 50 ILCS 4545. Interests. Units of local government must provide by ordinance for the amount of interests, if any, to be assessed on a late payment, underpayment, or non-payment of tax. 4550. 50 ILCS 4550. Late filing penalties. Late filing penalties may not exceed 5% of the amount of tax required to be shown as due on a return. A late filing penalty may not apply if a failure to file penalty is imposed by the unit of local government. A local tax administrator may determine that the late filing was due to reasonable cause and abate the penalty. Abate. Abate.
Threatening or negative become less intense or widespread.
Wait a minute. Abate.
Here's the definition of abate. Of something perceived as hostile, threatening, or negative become less intense or widespread.
So let's slow you down then. Let me slow you down here. Abate, hostile. So late filing penalties may not exceed 5%. Okay. A local tax administrator may determine that the late filing was due to reasonable cause and hostile the penalty and abate. Well, You guys could scrutinize that at a later time. 4555. Late payment penalty. Late payment penalties may not exceed 5% of the penalty, yada yada, imposed by the administrator, yada yada. Failure to file penalty. 4560. If no return is filed before the issuance of a notice of tax deficiency or of tax liability to the taxpayer, any failure to file penalty may not exceed 25% of the total tax due for the applicable reporting period for which the return was required to have been filed. A local tax administrator may determine that the failure to file a return was due to reasonable cause and abate the penalty. Credits and refunds. Units of local government shall provide a procedure for claiming a credit or refund of taxes, interest, or penalties paid in error. No units of local government are required to refund or credit any taxes voluntarily paid without written protests at the time of the payment. In the event that local government tax is declared invalid, enacted, or unconstitutional by a court of competent jurisdiction, a taxpayer shall not be deemed to have paid a tax voluntary if the taxpayer lack knowledge of the facts upon which the protest. Let me read this one over. A taxpayer shall not be deemed to have paid a tax voluntary if the tax or a taxpayer shall not be deemed to have paid a tax voluntary if the taxpayer lack knowledge of the facts upon which to protest the taxes at the time of the payment, or if the taxpayer paid the taxes under duress, unless the corporate authorities of unit local government expressively adopt a shorter statute of limitations for a particular tax. A statute of limitations of claim for credit or refund may not be less than 4 years of the calendar, yada yada, payment or remittance, yada yada, of paid whose, yada yada. Alrighty, let me take a picture of this one because we're gonna have to read this one over a few more times. Alrighty. $70, 4570. Installment contracts. If a local government tax ordinance or local tax administrator allows installment payments, agreements for delinquent tax amounts, the local tax administrator may not cancel any installment contract unless the taxpayer fails to pay any amount due on the time and fails to cure the delinquency in the allowable time supplied by the local tax administrator, or fails to demonstrate good faith in restructuring any installment plan, agreement, or contract with the local tax administrator. That's cute than a motherfucker right here. It's telling you that installment contracts, the local government, the county here in Illinois, it sends out installments, which it calls 6 month. But it's not, they don't say nothing about the word contracts. The word contract is nowhere to be found. This is amazing. I'm glad we stumbled on this today. it's going to require a little more digging. Installment contracts. So here we are at 7550 ILCS 4575. Bill Thomas says our government gets its just powers from our consent, but resisting. 4575 voluntary disclosure. For any tax for which a taxpayer has not received a written notice of an audit, investigation, or assessment from a local tax administrator, a taxpayer is entitled to file an application with the local tax administrator for a voluntary disclosure of the tax due. Take a picture of this one as well. Alrighty. A taxpayer filing a voluntary disclosure application must agree to pay the amount of the tax due along with interest of the % per month for all periods prior to the filing of the application, but not more than 4 years before the date filing the application, except for the amount of taxes and interest due under this section. A taxpayer filing a valid voluntary disclosure application may not be liable for any additional tax, interest, or penalty for any period before the date of the application was filed, provided, however, that if the taxpayer incorrectly determined and underpaid the tax amount of the taxes due as provided in this section, the taxpayer is liable for the underpaid tax along with the applicable interest on the underpaid tax, unless the underpayment was the result of fraud on the part of the taxpayer, in which case the application shall be deemed invalid and void. Invalid and void. The payment of tax interest required under this section must be made within 90 days after the filing of the voluntary disclosure application, or the date agreed to by the local tax administrator, whichever is longer, except that any additional amounts owed as a result of an underpayment of tax and interest previously paid under this section must be paid within 90 days after a final determination and the catalytic converter of all appeals of the additional amounts owned, or the date agreed to by the local tax administrator, whichever is longer. Like I said, we might have to read it over. Oh, that's a good one, Jack. That's a good one, Jack. Criminal penalties. Criminal penalties may not be imposed on taxpayers for non-compliance with the provisions of a locally administered tax unless non-compliance is a result of willful or fraudulent disregard of local tax laws. Review of liens. 4585. The local tax administrator must establish an internal review process concerning liens against taxpayers. If the lien is determined to be improper, the local tax administrator must remove the liens at local government's own expense, correct the taxpayer's credit record, and correct any public disclosure of improperly imposed lien. So you see what I'm saying here, guys? We're reading all this stuff, we're gaining this knowledge. We have to, here we just gathered 5 FOIA requests out of these statutes, paragraphs. Here it's telling us that there is liens that are determined improper. So there we go. We get to do a search for a batch. Do a search for a batch. And have them send you an XLS format. But let's go ahead and continue here. 4590. Publication of tax ordinances. Each unit of local government that imposes one or more locally administered taxes by ordinance must publish and make copies of those taxes ordinance readily available to the public upon request. I like that shit. Posting of tax ordinances on the interest satisfies the publication requirements of this subsection of this section. So readily available. There goes more knowledge. Alrighty. Anyways, guys, thank you guys for being a part of this stream. We have to continue doing readings from this county to the next, from my state to your state, all over 50 pieces. We have to study. We got to keep on reading, sharing info. This community is about knowledge and freedom. So we got to encourage the auditors to encourage the people. Tell your favorite auditor, your local favorite auditor, tell him, hey man, could you do a reading of your FOIA, of your state code? You know, you got auditors in Utah, you got auditors everywhere, in Colorado, California, Florida. Tell your local favorite auditor, hey man, we're your subscribers here. Could you do a reading of your state Freedom of Information Act or Public Record Code? And when you do that, make sure that you encourage your fellow neighbor to get out in the field and audit them. Bill Thomas says, you are inspiring. Nah, we all have to be informed. Shit, there's nothing inspiring. I'm just a fellow human being. Nothing special. The only difference between me and maybe somebody else is that guaranteed they didn't read this statute. That's the only difference. Guaranteed they didn't read the statute that I'm reading. So until people start reading the statutes, that's very applicable at this time, in this day and age. The important thing is the Freedom of Information Act, and everything else that revolves around that. Because really, the people pay a lifetime of taxes. For example, let's just use the tax because we're reading about taxes. They pay property taxes for their entire life. However, they could do some digging and see that, hey, maybe they overpaid. Maybe there was an error. Maybe there's, maybe they underpaid, and now they got to contact the county and you know what I'm saying, straighten that type of stuff out. But in order for people to be able to do things like that, they have to have that data. And how are they going to be able to have that data and obtain that data? Is through their local Freedom of Information Act, Public Record Act. So yeah, other statutes, you could read up on it. But anyhow, it doesn't happen overnight. Thank you guys again for being here. The one who encourages you to audit them.